two armies, both fielding some of the most physically fit soldiers on the planet, both with obstacle course traditions stretching back over a century, both absolutely convinced that their way of training soldiers to climb, crawl, jump, and fight through physical barriers is the superior method. So when a joint NATO training exchange put a U.S. Army infantry squad and a British Army infantry section on the same assault course, under the same conditions, with the same clock running, everyone expected a close race. What nobody expected was the result. And I need to tell you right now, the word humiliating in the title of this video is not my word. It is the word used by an American NCO who was there. And he was not talking about the finishing times. He was talking about the moment, roughly 40 minutes into the race, when his team realized they had fundamentally misunderstood the entire point of the exercise. Because here is what makes this story fascinating. The U.S. team had faster individual soldiers. They had stronger individual athletes. On paper, man for man, they were physically superior on almost every measurable metric. And they still lost. Not by a little. By a margin so wide that it forced a genuine doctrinal conversation at battalion level about how the U.S. Army trains soldiers to overcome obstacles. And the reason has nothing to do with fitness. It has everything to do with a philosophical difference so deeply embedded in how these two armies think. About soldiering that most people in both armies do not even realize it exists until you put them side by side and start the clock. Before we get into what happened on that course, I need you to understand something about military obstacle courses that most civilians and even many soldiers never think about. People assume an obstacle course is a fitness test. Run fast, climb high, crawl low, do it quickly. That is how obstacle courses are portrayed in movies, in recruitment videos, in social media content. And at the most basic level, yes, physical fitness matters. You cannot haul yourself over a 12-foot wall if you cannot do a pull-up. You cannot leopard crawl under wire for 30 meters if you have no upper body endurance. Fitness is the entry ticket. But fitness is not what obstacle courses were designed to test. Military obstacle courses were invented during the First World War to simulate the physical chaos of the battlefield. Walls represent barriers you encounter in urban combat. Ditches represent trenches and shell craters. Water crossings represent rivers and flooded terrain. Rope climbs represent scaling damaged structures. Crawl tunnels represent confined spaces in rubble and fortifications. These are not gym exercises. They're combat simulations. And in combat, you do not face these obstacles alone. You face them as a unit, with equipment under fire. While responsible for the soldiers around you, and that distinction, solo athletic performance versus collective tactical movement, is the fault line that cracked wide open during this exercise. Remember that, because in about 10 minutes, you're going to see exactly how that fault line swallowed an entire team. The setting. A British Army assault course in Catterick, North Yorkshire, home of the Infantry Training Centre, where every British infantry soldier is forged. This course is legendary among British squaddies. 16 obstacles over 800 meters. Built on uneven ground with deliberate elevation changes. Some obstacles can be completed individually, some cannot. And that second category is the one that matters for everything that follows. The rules are simple. 8-person teams, full combat equipment meaning helmet, webbing, weapon, and a 20-kilogram Bergen. Every team member must complete every obstacle. If one person fails an obstacle, the team fails that obstacle. Time stops when the last team member crosses the finish line. Not the first, the last. I need you to hold on to that rule because it is not a small detail. It is the entire philosophy of British military training compressed into a single scoring criterion. Your team is only as fast as your slowest member completing the hardest obstacle. The U.S. squad approached this course the way the American military approaches most physical challenges, with supreme individual confidence and raw athletic aggression. And honestly, their confidence was justified. These were infantry soldiers from a unit with a serious reputation. Their physical training program was exceptional. Average age 24, average PT scores well above the Army standard. Several soldiers who could max every event on the Army Combat Fitness Test. One soldier who had competed in CrossFit regionals before enlisting. These were not average soldiers. These were genuinely elite physical specimens by any reasonable standard. The British section looked different. It's not worse. Different. Average age 21, slightly younger. Fitness levels excellent, but perhaps less individually spectacular. No one in the section would have stood out in a CrossFit gym. But every single one of them had completed the combat infantryman's course at Catterick. 28 weeks of the most physically demanding initial infantry training in NATO, and every single one of them had run this exact assault course, or courses nearly identical to it, dozens of times, in rain, in mud, in darkness, in full kit, as a team, always as a team, never once as individuals. And here is the doctrinal difference that explains everything you are about to watch. The U.S. Army trains obstacle course skills primarily through individual repetition. You learn the technique for each obstacle. You practice it. You're assessed on your ability to complete each obstacle within a time standard. Individual performance, individual assessment, individual excellence. This produces soldiers who are individually outstanding at negotiating obstacles. Fast, strong, confident, and capable. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this approach in isolation. It builds genuine physical competence. The British Army trains obstacle course skills primarily through collective repetition. You learn the technique, yes. But from your very first attempt at every obstacle, you are doing it with your section. You are assessed not on whether you personally cleared the wall, but on whether your entire section cleared the wall. And crucially, you are taught specific techniques for getting people over obstacles who cannot get over them alone. Boost techniques, howling techniques, human ladder formations, methods for passing equipment across gaps before the soldiers cross, systems for ensuring the heaviest and least agile member of the team gets over every barrier, not through their own individual strength, but through the coordinated effort of the team around them. This is not just physical training. This is the British Army's entire combat philosophy expressed through physical action. The unit is the weapon, not the individual. It's two different philosophies, both legitimate, both producing effective soldiers. But only one of them is designed for the specific challenge they are about to face, and neither team fully understands this yet. The clock starts. The first 4 obstacles are individual movement challenges: a sprint to a 6-foot wall, a balance beam over a ditch, a rope swing across a water pit, a low crawl under barbed wire for 20 meters. These obstacles are designed to be completed by individual soldiers in sequence. Speed and fitness are the primary factors. And this is where the U.S. team shines exactly as you would expect. They attack these obstacles with explosive energy. Their wall clearance technique is aggressive and effective, launching themselves upward with powerful hip drives. Hooking a leg over and rolling across the top with practiced efficiency. Their balance beam crossings are fast and confident. The rope swing is attacked with gymnastic aggression. The low crawl is executed with the kind of furious intensity that American infantry training excels at producing. The British team is noticeably slower through these early obstacles. Not because they lack fitness, because they are pacing themselves, and more importantly, they are staying together. When the fastest member of the section clears the wall, he does not sprint to the next obstacle. He waits. He watches the next man come over. The team member struggles with the rope swing. The soldiers on the far side are already positioning themselves to assist if needed. They move as a cluster, never spreading out, never allowing gaps to develop between team members. To an observer focused on speed, this looks like hesitation. Looks like they are leaving time on the course. In reality, they are executing exactly as they have been trained. Stay together. Maintain unit cohesion. Fast do not leave the slow behind. After Obstacle 4, the U.S. team leads by nearly 2 minutes. Their fastest soldiers have already reached Obstacle 6, while their slowest are finishing Obstacle 4. The squad is spread across roughly 200 meters of the course. They look dominant. They look like they are crushing this. The British section is bunched together, all 8 soldiers within 15 meters of each other, just finishing Obstacle 4. They look slower. They look cautious. But every single member of the section has completed every obstacle and is ready for what comes next. And what comes next changes everything. Obstacle 5. The 12-foot wall. Smooth timber. Vertical. No handholds, no footholds, no rope. 12 feet of flat wooden surface that must be negotiated in full combat equipment with a 20-kilogram pack on your back. This obstacle is a watershed moment on every British assault course, and it was specifically designed to be impossible for the vast majority of soldiers to complete alone. Read that again. It was designed to be impossible alone. A 12-foot smooth wall and full kit with a heavy Bergen cannot be free-climbed by most humans, regardless of their fitness level. Some exceptional athletes can do it, most cannot. And in a section of 8 soldiers, there will always be at least 2 or 3 who physically cannot clear this wall without assistance. That is not a design flaw. That is the entire point of the obstacle. The first U.S. soldiers reach the wall and immediately begin attempting to scale it individually. The strongest and tallest soldier in the squad makes it on his second attempt. An incredible display of raw athletic power, launching himself upward, catching the top edge, and muscling himself over with pure upper body strength. Genuinely impressive. A second soldier makes it over the same way. Third struggles, falls back twice, then barely makes it on his fourth attempt. He is breathing hard now. His forearms are burning. Time is passing. Meanwhile, the next 2 U.S. soldiers arrive at the wall and begin their own individual attempts. One makes it after 3 tries, the other cannot. He is 5'7" and carrying the same 20-kilogram Bergen as everyone else. He jumps. He scrabbles at the smooth wood. He cannot reach the top edge. His fingers scrape the timber and find nothing to grip. He tries again and again. Each attempt saps more energy. Failure increases frustration. The soldiers who already cleared the wall are on the other side, waiting, watching. One of them reaches back over the top to offer a hand, but they have not practiced this. The angle is awkward. The weight of the Bergen pulls the struggling soldier backward. The assisting soldier nearly gets pulled off the wall himself. There is no technique here. There is no trained system. There is only improvisation driven by good intentions, but no rehearsed method. If you are finding this analysis valuable, and you want to see the full breakdown of what happens at the final obstacle, because I promise you, it is even more dramatic than this, hit subscribe now and stay with me. I have a comparison coming next week between French Foreign Legion and Royal Marine Selection that reveals why one of these legendary units has quietly changed their entire assessment philosophy, and the reason connects directly to what we are watching right now. But do not leave yet, because the 12-foot wall is only the beginning of the U.S. Team S problems. Now watch the British section arrive at the same wall. They do not even pause. They have done this 100 times. 2 soldiers immediately position themselves at the base of the wall. Backs flat against the timber, hands cupped at knee height, creating a human step. A third soldier steps into those cupped hands, gets boosted upward, grabs the top of the wall, and hauls himself over. He immediately turns around, lies across the top of the wall with his upper body hanging over the far side, and extends both arms downward. The next soldier gets the same boost from below, grabs the arms of the soldier on top, and gets pulled up and over. They cycle through this system with mechanical precision. Boost from below, pull from above, soldier over, next soldier up. The smallest member of the section, a soldier who weighs perhaps 65 kilograms soaking wet and could never clear this wall alone in a lifetime of attempts, goes over the wall in 8 seconds. 8 seconds. Because the system is not designed around his individual capability. It is designed around the team's collective capability. The last 2 soldiers at the base, the boosters, they get over because the soldiers now on top pull them up using a Bergen strap as an improvised rope. This technique is taught at Catterick. It is practiced until it becomes instinct. It is assessed in the dark, in the rain, in the mud, with instructors screaming at you until every section can execute it without thinking. The British section clears the 12-foot wall in 3 minutes flat, all 8 soldiers. The U.S. squad is still working on it. 2 soldiers still have not made it over. Time advantage has evaporated, and the course is only getting harder. Over the next 6 obstacles, a pattern emerges that becomes almost painful to watch. Every obstacle that requires purely individual effort, the U.S. soldiers are faster and more explosive. Every obstacle that requires team coordination, the British section executes with a speed and fluidity that makes the U.S. squad look like they are encountering these challenges for the first time, because in terms of doing them as a team, they essentially are the rope bridge. Single rope stretched across a 6-meter gap with a 3-meter drop into cold water below. Individually, both teams cross at similar speeds. But the British team has a system for passing Bergens across the rope separately from the soldiers. reducing the weight each man carries during the crossing and dramatically reducing the risk of someone falling. The U.S. team crosses with their full equipment. One soldier falls. He is wet, cold, and has to climb out of the pit and attempt the crossing again. 7 minutes lost. The cargo net climb. A vertical net rising 8 meters. The British section sends soldiers up in pairs, one on each side of the net, so their weight counterbalances each other and stabilizes the net. The U.S. soldiers climb individually. The net sways wildly with each solo climber. It takes longer. It burns more energy. One soldier gets his equipment tangled in the net and has to be helped free by a teammate who climbs back up to assist. More time lost, more energy burned, or frustration building. And this is where I need to talk about something that nobody in these conversations ever addresses: the psychological dimension of team versus individual obstacle performance. Because what is happening inside the U.S. squad right now is genuinely corrosive, and it is not anyone's fault. It is a predictable consequence of training philosophy. When you train soldiers to approach obstacles as individual challenges, you create an implicit internal ranking within every squad. Everyone knows who cleared the wall first. Everyone knows who fell off the rope bridge. Everyone knows who is slowing the team down. This knowledge creates social pressure that is psychologically devastating in a team context. The soldiers who are struggling feel the weight of their teammates' frustration. They push harder, take greater risks, burn more energy, trying to match the performance of the strongest members. The soldiers who are excelling feel a growing irritation at being held back by the slower members. Team cohesion does not increase under this pressure. Fractures. In the British system, because team completion has been the standard from the very first day of training, there is no individual ranking on obstacles. Nobody cares if you cannot clear the wall alone. Nobody has ever cleared the wall alone because you are never asked to clear the wall alone. The system removes the ego component entirely. The smallest, weakest, least athletic member of the section is not a liability. He is a teammate who gets the same boost, the same pull, the same assistance as everyone else, and he knows it. And because he knows it, he does not waste energy on impossible individual attempts driven by pride. He steps into the cupped hands, grabs the extended arms, and goes over the wall. No shame, no frustration, no wasted energy. This difference in psychological framework might sound soft, might sound like it belongs in a leadership seminar rather than a military training analysis. But I promise you, by the end of this course, this psychological difference has cost the U.S. team more time than any single physical obstacle. Energy wasted on failed individual attempts driven by pride. Frustration eroding communication. Improvised teamwork techniques that cost time because they have never been rehearsed. All of it adds up, minute by minute. Obstacle by obstacle, the gap widens. Obstacle 14. Team carry. A telegraph pole weighing approximately 120 kilograms that must be carried by the entire team over a 200-meter course that includes a ditch crossing and a low bridge. This obstacle cannot even be attempted individually. It is pure team coordination. And here the difference between trained collective effort and improvised collective effort becomes almost embarrassing. The British section picks up the pole using a coordinated lift technique they have practiced hundreds of times. They distribute the weight based on height. Taller soldiers at the ends where the pole rides higher, shorter soldiers in the middle. They move at a synchronized pace, communicating with short, sharp commands. Left turn, ditch, down, up, bridge. Lower. They cross the 200 meters in just over 4 minutes. It is not pretty. It is not elegant. But it is fast, and it is efficient, and it is the product of relentless collective rehearsal. The U.S. squad picks up the pole and immediately struggles with weight distribution. The tallest soldier ends up in the middle where his height creates an angle that puts more weight on the shorter soldiers at the ends. They do not have a rehearsed communication system for carrying as a group. So commands are shouted in multiple voices and sometimes conflict. At the ditch, they lower the pole awkwardly. One soldier stumbles and nearly drops his end. Under the low bridge, coordination breaks down further because they have not practiced how to lower a shared load while moving. They get through it, but it takes them nearly 8 minutes. Double the British time on a single obstacle. Now let me give you the numbers that earned the word humiliating. Final results. The British section completed the course with all 8 soldiers crossing the finish line in 51 minutes. The U.S. squad's last soldier crossed the finish line in 1 hour and 14 minutes, 23 minutes slower. And here's what makes those numbers sting. The cumulative individual times for the U.S. squad. If you added up how quickly each soldier personally completed the obstacles they could complete, were actually faster than the British cumulative individual times. Man for man, the Americans were quicker. But the scoring did not measure individual speed. It measured team completion. And on that metric, on the metric that actually mattered, the gap was enormous. The American NCO who used the word humiliating was not describing the time difference. He was describing the moment of realization. The moment when his squad understood that they had spent years training for the wrong metric. They had been building individual obstacle course athletes when they should have been building obstacle course teams. And the frustration in that realization was not directed at the British soldiers who had beaten them. It was directed inward, at a training system that had allowed them to believe individual excellence was sufficient for collective challenges. And now, I need to pull the lens back, because this is not just about obstacle courses. This is about a fundamental tension in military philosophy that has been debated for centuries. Is the primary unit of combat effectiveness the individual soldier or the small team? The U.S. military, particularly since the global war on terror, has invested enormous institutional energy in building the individual warrior. Individual fitness tests, individual marksmanship qualification, individual skill assessments. The Army Combat Fitness Test, implemented in 2020, is an individual assessment with individual standards. The entire evaluation system is built around measuring and developing individual soldier capability, and it produces exceptional individual soldiers. The British Army invests more institutional energy in the team, section-level assessments, team fitness events, collective skill evaluations where individual performance is deliberately subsumed into group outcomes. The British fitness assessment includes team events specifically designed so that stronger soldiers must help weaker soldiers meet the standard. You are assessed not just on your own performance, but on your contribution to the team's performance. And it produces exceptional small teams. Neither philosophy is wrong in absolute terms, but they produce different outcomes under different conditions. In scenarios that reward individual excellence, speed, and physical dominance, the American approach excels. In scenarios that reward coordination, collective problem solving, and the ability to move an entire team through complex challenges at the speed of the slowest member, the British approach excels. And here is the uncomfortable question that this obstacle course forces us to confront. Which of those two scenarios more closely resembles actual ground combat? Because in actual ground combat, your squad does not move at the speed of your fastest soldier. It moves at the speed of your slowest soldier carrying the heaviest equipment through the worst terrain. In actual ground combat, obstacles are not individual challenges to be conquered through personal athletic ability. They are collective problems to be solved through coordinated team effort. Walls must be scaled as a unit. Gaps must be crossed as a unit. Casualties must be carried as a unit. Equipment must be moved as a unit. The individual warrior is essential, but the individual warrior operating outside the context of a coordinated team is just a fast, strong, well-trained person who cannot accomplish the mission alone. The British military learned this lesson through painful historical experience. The Falklands War, where small unit cohesion under extreme conditions proved decisive. Northern Ireland, where section-level teamwork in complex urban environments was the difference between life and death. Afghanistan, where British infantry sections operated in remote patrol bases, where team capability mattered infinitely more than individual stardom. These experiences reinforced again and again that the section, not the soldier, is the fundamental unit of combat power. And British training philosophy reflects those lessons in every assessment, every exercise, every obstacle course, every single day of a soldier's career. The U.S. military has its own combat experience that should teach the same lesson, and in many ways it does. American small unit tactics are excellent. American squad leaders are superbly trained. But the institutional training and assessment infrastructure still tilts heavily toward individual metrics. The systems that evaluate soldiers promote soldiers, and develop soldiers still emphasize individual performance over collective contribution. And this creates a subtle but persistent misalignment between what the institution measures and what the battlefield actually demands. But here's what happened after the obstacle course that gives me genuine optimism, because this is where the character of both armies shines through. The U.S. squad leader, a sergeant with 2 combat deployments, did something that defines professional military culture at its best. He asked the British section commander to teach his squad the British techniques, not in a classroom, on the course. That afternoon, both teams went back to the start line and ran the course again. Together, British soldiers teaching American soldiers how to boost teammates over walls, how to pass equipment across obstacles separately, how to communicate during team carries, how to pace a section so the fastest runners do not burn out while the slowest runners get left behind. The second run, the U.S. squad completed the course in 58 minutes, a 16-minute improvement achieved not through greater physical effort but through better technique, better coordination, and a fundamentally different approach to what the obstacles were actually asking them to do. 16 minutes gained by changing philosophy, not fitness. That improvement represents the difference between training for individual performance and training for team performance. And it happened in a single afternoon of shared learning. This is what military alliances are supposed to produce, not competition that creates winners and losers, but honest exchange that makes both sides stronger. The British section learned things from the Americans too. The individual wall clearance technique that the strongest U.S. soldiers used was mechanically superior to what the British soldiers had been taught. 2 British soldiers adopted elements of the American technique and found they could self-boost over lower walls faster while still being available to assist teammates on higher ones. The American approach to the low crawl, aggressive and physically intense but undeniably fast, offered a genuine improvement that several British soldiers incorporated into their own movement. Knowledge flows both ways when professionals respect each other enough to learn openly. And that mutual respect was genuine and immediate on both sides. The American soldiers respected the British teamwork because they saw its results with their own eyes. The British soldiers respected the American athleticism because individual physical capability is genuinely impressive regardless of how it is applied. And both sides recognized that the ideal soldier is one who combines individual physical excellence with trained collective capability. A soldier who can clear a wall alone when he has to, but who instinctively helps his teammate over first because the team completing the obstacle matters more than the individual completing it faster. Let me bring this back to why I believe this story matters beyond the military context, because there's something here that connects to how we think about excellence in every field. Modern Western culture is obsessed with individual performance, individual achievement, individual metrics, individual success stories. We celebrate the solo entrepreneur, the standout athlete, the individual genius. Our assessment systems in education, in business, in sport, in the military are overwhelmingly designed to measure and reward individual output. And individual excellence is genuinely important. Nobody is arguing otherwise. The most complex challenges in the real world, in combat, in business, in medicine, in engineering, in every domain where the stakes are genuinely high, these challenges are almost never solved by individuals operating alone. They are solved by teams. The quality of those teams is not determined by the average individual capability of their members. It is determined by how effectively those individuals coordinate, communicate, support each other, and compensate for each other's weaknesses while amplifying each other's strengths. A team of individually outstanding performers who have never trained to operate collectively will be outperformed by a team of individually good performers who have trained relentlessly to function as a unit. This is not theory. This is what we just watched happen on an obstacle course in Northern England. And it is what happens every single day in operating rooms, on construction sites, in aircraft cockpits, in fire stations, and on battlefields around the world. The humiliating result is not that the U.S. Army lost an obstacle course race. The humiliating result is the realization that an entire training philosophy can optimize for the wrong metric without anyone noticing until the moment of truth arrives. And the empowering result, the one that actually matters, is that the gap can be closed remarkably quickly when professional soldiers commit to learning from each other with honesty and humility. The U.S. Army is evolving. Recent updates to infantry training doctrine place increasing emphasis on collective physical tasks. The Army Combat Fitness Test, while still an individual assessment, is being supplemented at unit level with team-based physical challenges that assess collective capability. More joint training exercises with British and other NATO forces are exposing American soldiers to different training philosophies and creating exactly the kind of learning moments we saw in that obstacle course. The direction of travel is correct. The institutional will exists. But changing a training culture that has been built around individual metrics for decades requires sustained commitment and the kind of institutional patience that military bureaucracies often struggle to maintain. The British Army, meanwhile, cannot afford complacency. Individual physical standards in the British Army have historically been lower than American standards, and in a world where individual soldier capability increasingly matters in complex combat environments, the British commitment to collective performance cannot come at the expense of individual excellence. The ideal is both: a soldier who is individually exceptional and collectively integrated. Building that soldier requires investment in both dimensions simultaneously. And every hour spent on team obstacle drills is an hour not spent on individual physical development. The balance is difficult. Both armies are searching for it. Neither has found the perfect formula yet. What I want you to take away from this is not a simple ranking of which army is better. That question is meaningless without context. Better at what? Under what conditions? For what mission? The relevant question is, what does this comparison reveal about the assumptions we make when we design training systems, assessment frameworks, and definitions of excellence? The U.S. Army assumed that building the best individual soldiers would naturally produce the best teams. It is a logical assumption. It seems obviously true, but it is not. Team performance is a skill that must be trained directly, deliberately, and continuously. It does not emerge automatically from a collection of individually excellent performers. Any sports coach in the world could have told you this. And yet the institutional training systems of one of the most powerful militaries in history gradually drifted toward individual optimization because individual metrics are easier to measure, it's easier to standardize, and easier to defend in budget justifications. The British Army assumed that building the best teams would compensate for individual limitations. This assumption has proven largely correct in the obstacle course context and in many combat scenarios. But it has its own risks. A team-centric philosophy can mask individual weaknesses that become critical when soldiers are separated from their teams. When casualties reduce section strength, or when missions require individual initiative beyond the collective framework, the answer, as it almost always is in military affairs, lies in integration, rather than choosing one philosophy over the other. The best armies in the world will be those that build individually excellent soldiers and then train those soldiers relentlessly to operate as cohesive teams. Neither dimension alone is sufficient. Both together produce something genuinely formidable. So the next time you see an obstacle course, whether it is military training or a weekend mud run or a team-building event at your workplace, ask yourself this question. Is the goal to get yourself over the wall as fast as possible? Or is the goal to get everyone over the wall? Because the answer to that question reveals everything about whether you are training individuals or building a team. And in every domain that genuinely matters, the team will outperform the collection of individuals every single time. That is the lesson from Catterick. That is what made a squad of America's finest infantry soldiers use the word humiliating about their own performance. Not because they were outrun, they were not. Not because they were weak, they were stronger. Because they were shown, clearly and undeniably, that they had been training alone for challenges that can only be overcome together. If you want to see more breakdowns like this, more honest comparisons that go beyond surface-level fitness and firepower to examine the training philosophies that actually determine who wins and who fails when the pressure is real, subscribe now. Next week, I am releasing a comparison that has been requested more than any other. Why one NATO Special Forces unit still requires every candidate to complete a team endurance event, where the entire selection cohort passes or fails together, and why their operational performance statistics suggest this approach produces something that individual selection simply cannot replicate. The data genuinely challenged my assumptions, and I think it will challenge yours too. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me whether your own training, military or otherwise, emphasizes individual or collective performance. And if you think I have been unfair to either army in this analysis, tell me exactly why. I read every comment, and the best conversations are the ones where someone changes my mind. Until next time,